Episode number 5, City Point and Fishing Lessons. My brother Gary was the ideal big brother. He was like a second father. He taught me how to fish in the nearby Charles River, beginning when I was 6. His reward was getting to untangle my fishing line over and over. He did it usually with just a little grumbling. He showed me how to dig worms and where and how to let the fish take the bait and get it fully in its mouth before setting the hook. We caught perch, sunfish, hornpout, eels, and sometimes big carp, which we sold to Mr. Ozzybo, the local grocer, who turned it into gefilte fish. There was also jigging with a three-way hook during the spring migrations of herring, alewife, smelt, and shad up the Charles River. By the way, damming Boston Harbor stopped those migrations. As I got better at fishing, he took me to the Atlantic Ocean and South Boston City Point, a very big adventure. This involved taking the subway to Andrews Station, then a change to a trolley car, and the trip alone was fun. City Point, part of Castle Island, is a long, narrow, stranded blue-collar beach on an inlet of Boston Harbor. There we fished for the much larger saltwater fish at a long, worn, smelly, blackened and rotting, worn fish pier at City Point. The fishermen were mostly poor folks who ate what they caught, as we did. At Castle Island, there were worn paths to explore the historical Civil War fort with seashells, horseshoe crabs, driftwood, rounded and colorful stones to collect. If we got hungry, there was also the famous Kelly's Landing clam shop with its huge Moxie sign, a landmark sadly also now gone. And there was the reflected sunshine off the harbor and the overriding salt air tank. What a feast for the senses it all was. The worm digging and bait gathering lessons were quite different at the ocean. The routine was we would bring a small shovel to the water's edge and dig into the sand for bait. Any sandworms, crabs, clams, quahogs, mussels, or other live bait we would put in the bait bucket. Then we would go find a vacant space on the fish pier. There were benches at some locations on the pier, and if you were lucky, you would get such a spot. Everything on the pier was covered with gull guano and fish guts from cleaning fish, empty bottles, leftover garbage, old rotting bait, empty bait containers, tangled fishing lines, broken reel and rod pots, and an overarching low tide stink. I loved it. It was horizon lifting, eye popping, and thought provoking for a curious, full of life boy. Sometimes we would use bait on a big hook and drop the line with a sinker to the bottom. It was pulled inshore or offshore depending on the tide. And sometimes we would use a daredevil spoon or other lure that was spun as it was reeled in, showing its striped red, white, and silver sides to attract mackerel, pollock, haddock, cod, flounder, eels, and sometimes exotics like shad, or small shark. There were no bluefish or striped bass in the harbor in those days. I don't know why, but those fish are now plentiful, while the others mentioned have been decimated by commercial overfishing. The prize was haddock, which was the best eating. After that was cod, pollock, and our father's favorite, mackerel. Dad would be happy eating only tinker mackerel, the smaller version of the breed, which migrated north in Boston in the spring. When the mackerel were running, you could catch hundreds of them very quickly. A year later, I remember a trip to City Point that I made by myself. I had had a very successful fishing day. On my way home, I carried my rod and my reel and my fishing tackle box, plus a long string of big cod, haddock, and pollock strung through their bowels and gills on a chain over my shoulder. Each fish must have weighed 2 or 3 pounds, and I had maybe 5 of them. I took the same route home by subway and trolley car, but this time it was rush hour. People were going home from work, and the MTA trolley had many well-dressed folks. The cars were full, and I had to stand. Being a little boy, I couldn't reach the high strap hangers, so I held on to the back of a seat in the crowded car. Once in a while, one of my freshly caught fish would flop around. The women were gasping and shying away. The men were perhaps jealous, and everyone was standing as far away from this curious, dirty, smelly, red-headed, amused, and happy little kid. Today I remember the whole picture with great amusement. Thank you for viewing or listening to my podcast episode. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, and if you so choose, I ask you to send a good review and perhaps refer friends who might be interested in this podcast series. Again, my thanks.